Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Rosalie Ginevra, the Executive Director of the Architectural League, and I am honored, truly honored to, on behalf of the League, to welcome you to this lecture and discussion with Yasmeen Lari. Yasmeen Lari is demonstrating with her Barefoot social architecture movement the power of revolutionary ideas to create shelter, empower communities, and walk lightly on the land. She has developed her work by understanding and respecting and drawing on traditional knowledge and skills to create a radically effective new way of thinking about materials, about how to design and build, and about who can design and build and for whom. We're delighted to have her with us today from her home base in Karachi. The worldwide interest in Mrs. Lari and her work is evident from the fact that we have program registrants today from Istanbul, Cape Town, Tel Aviv, Helsinki, Bangalore, Mexico City, Accra, among many other places, including, of course, New York City. Before we move into our program, I'd like to thank our co-presenter of this lecture, the Urbanist Channon School of Architecture at the Cooper Union, and thank the public agencies that support the work of the Architectural League. The New York City Department of Cultural Affairs with the support of the City Council, and the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the New York State Legislature and the Office of the Governor. Most of all, I'd like to thank the members of the Architectural League whose support makes this and all League programs possible. If you're not a member, I invite you to join the League today. This lecture is part of the Architectural League's current work series, organized by League Program Director Ann Rieselbach and Program Manager Robbie Lehman, which this fall has looked at innovative design practices that bring widely varying perspectives to contemporary housing challenges. The series has already presented British architect Peter Barber and French architects Anne Lacaton, Jean-Philippe Bassal, and Frederic Drouot. Videos of those lectures are available on the League's website at archleague.org. Mrs. Lari will be introduced by Cassim Shepard, who will talk with her after her lecture and will moderate a discussion prompted by questions from the audience. Please use the Q&A function on Zoom for your questions, not the chat function, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. Cassim Shepard is a Pakistani-American urbanist, filmmaker, writer, and teacher. He was the founding editor of Urban Omnibus, the Architectural League's online publication, and he's the author of City Makers, The Culture and Craft of Practical Urbanism, which draws on his work with Urban Omnibus. Cassim is currently working on a book on the history and contemporary prospects of self-help housing around the world, tentatively entitled Self-Help Housing, Incremental Approaches to Shelter Since 1965. Cassim, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rosalie, and thank you everyone for joining us to hear the incomparable Mrs. Lari tell us a little bit more about her work. It's such a great honor to be here to welcome virtually, but to welcome into this space one of my heroes. Yasmeen Lari is among Pakistan's best known architects, responsible for the designs of many iconic buildings in Pakistan that range from social housing to corporate headquarters. And in 1980, in the midst of this prolific architectural career, she and her late husband founded the Heritage Foundation of Pakistan to research, document, and safeguard Pakistan's cultural heritage, leading to the conservation of several historic monuments and heritage sites and a long-term collaboration with UNESCO. In 2000, she closed her professional practice to focus on preservation and humanitarian efforts. Since the devastating earthquake in northern Pakistan in 2005, Mrs. Lari has devised various programs that center women as co-creators of zero carbon footprint structures using sustainable building materials and techniques. These have grown to include more than 40,000 green shelters alongside clay stoves and outdoor kitchens that have dramatically improved the health, safety, and dignity of women and families living in extreme poverty. Her work has been recognized with the Sitara Imtiaz, Pakistan's highest honor, the prestigious Fukuoka Prize for Asian Art and Culture, and the Jane Drew Prize, among others. But besides this much-deserved international acclaim, her work also points to a profound belief in the power of architecture to transform the lives of the most vulnerable, not just through design, but through preservation, education, and co-creation with the end users. Mrs. Lari's firm commitment to low-cost, zero-carbon, zero-waste strategies with forms and techniques drawn from heritage and local sustainable materials encapsulates what she has termed barefoot social architecture. I'm so delighted to hear more about the principles of barefoot social architecture, and in particular, how Mrs. Lari's focus on social and ecological justice through human-centered architecture can foster pride, well-being, and dignity. Please join me in welcoming Yasmeen Lari, who's going to share a presentation and then followed by a conversation.
Well, greetings from Pakistan to everybody who's watching. And thank you so much, Cassim, for this very kind introduction. And what a privilege to be among friends of the Architectural League of New York, who are pursuing design excellence for enrichment of people's lives. Thank you, Rosalie and Anne, for providing me with this opportunity. And such a pleasure that urbanist and writer Cassim is here today, the son of my friend, the distinguished Samina Qureshi, a remarkable Pakistani woman who broke all barriers through her creative achievements. In the age of Me Too and Black Lives Matter movements, heroically spearheaded by women and young people of all hues and from all walks of life, agitations that helped to liberate many from colonial mindsets. I salute all those frail men, women, and youth in cities around the world, but most of all in the US, who had themselves encountered prejudices, who raised their voices fearlessly to battle against prejudices in their society or injustices in society. And then we have COVID-19 that knows no borders, which underscores fragility of human life with no assurance of safety due to your wealth or status. A pandemic that requires a more humanistic environment embracing all classes. I believe that this is the time for a paradigm shift in thinking and for us to devise a major reset of our conceptions. And as we reflect on the evolution of the present architectural practice, we know that traditionally architects have had to seek patronage to create iconic edifices. From time immemorial, it has been territorial empires such as the Athenians and the Romans, business empires such as the Medici family of Florence, the great Mughal kingdom in the subcontinent, the monarchies in Asia and Europe, and more recently, numerous colonial powers, all utilizing architecture as a device to express supremacy. As we know, during the age of the colonies, wealth that had been brought back to home countries spurred the Industrial Revolution, and ensuing prosperity when spectacular palace-like mansions were erected in mother countries, which also strengthened the practice of commissioning architects. But today, we stand at crossroads. As I've said in my manifesto published in London's Design magazine, today we live in an era that is beset with fragmentation and disruptions. It is a world ravaged by rising poverty levels and increasing disparities, depletion of the Earth's resources and climate change impact, along with COVID-19 imperatives. In a new world order, how can we continue to design for the privileged 1% who have acquired the most wealth? Global warming, greenhouse gas emissions, recurring disasters, climate emergencies, and climate change migrants, conflict-impelled refugees, the displaced and the homeless, all require innovative design solutions. Under such challenging circumstances, when many countries in the world will be unable to meet UNDP's Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, it is the power of design that is in demand for serving the other 99%. Remember, it is not only the privileged who have a right to employ well-designed environments. The disadvantaged and those that live on the margins need more, not less design to achieve a better quality of life. I believe the time has come when we must develop a framework for a changed direction in architecture. We need to relinquish the desire to create imposing megastructures, which have traditionally been commissioned by the likes of the Medicis of Florence, robber barons of East India Company, merchant princes of Industrial Revolution, and present days exploitative multinationals that promote high carbon lifestyles. We are all aware of the damage caused by the colonial mindset to the Earth's ecosystem due to wasteful and highly consumptive ways of living and building, as well as excessive use of Earth's resources promoted by the exploitative capitalist system. We need to work together to find ways to deal with social injustices in the global South. Equally, we have to combat what I call ecological injustices and perhaps eco-bigotry that is present in global North. So let me see if I can start my presentation. If you'll just bear with me for a moment. Let's see. I have to now, just a moment. sorry, just take me a moment, and I think I'm getting there. I hope you can see it well now. So if we wish to reverse the tide and save the planet from further misuse, I suggest that we need to seek solutions found in countries in the global south, such as Pakistan, which has rich traditions based on a diversity of tangible and intangible heritage. Solutions that are based on local wisdom and vernacular techniques to fashion an equitable world, which is driven by both social and ecological justice. So just a little bit about Heritage Foundation of Pakistan. That it was co-founded with my late husband, Yasmeen Lari, an eminent historian and an author, due to which I could be engaged with heritage safeguarding and conservation from 1980 onwards. At the same time, my work with heritage and vernacular traditions helped me to devise strategies for the poor of the country. So on the left, you see this amazing tomb, 16th century of Sultan Ibrahim, that Heritage Foundation has actually conserved at the Makli World Heritage Site, the largest Muslim necropolis in the world, where the monuments present 400 years of diverse styles of architecture. I urge you all to come to Pakistan, and you must visit Makli when you come. And on the right, of course, you can see this is a little house that was constructed. It's a zero carbon earth masonry structure, one of thousands of homes that we helped build after countrywide floods in 2010. As you can see, it is a not-for-profit social and cultural entrepreneur organization established for safeguarding Pakistan's cultural heritage. But as Cassim explained, since 2005, it provides humanitarian assistance by linking heritage for innovative, socially and ecologically led initiatives. So this is what I thought I'll just show you a little bit about what heritage of Pakistan is like. There's a tangible heritage, as you can see on the slide in the portion on the left. Because Pakistan is custodian of such a diverse heritage, which ranges from a rich collection of tangible heritage that begins with Bronze Age World Heritage Mohenjo-daro, Hindu, Buddhist, and Sikh remains, and then 14th century Sultanate period sites such as Makli World Heritage itself. And then there's 16th century Mughal forts and palaces and paradisal gardens, and a shared heritage of the British colonial period of 19th and early 20th century, all lending a diversity to our cultural legacy that is not found in many countries. And then there's the intangible heritage, as you can see, that has shaped the lives of our people, that is all pervading and includes Sufi traditions and spiritualism, folklore and folk traditions, oral history and diverse crafts, many still being practiced by rural women that have been passed on to them from generation to generation, from mother to mother, basically. And then the vernacular heritage, as you can see, from where I have learned the use of sustainable materials, local sourcing, ease of handling, economical in use, and one that is based on age-old local wisdom. Some of the principles that you see here are based on natural devices for creation of microclimate within buildings that can be drawn from traditional environments. And let's just see maybe one of them. This is on the left is a book on traditional architecture Thatta that was a documentation carried out by us in 1979. And I wrote about this historic town with its distinctive wind catches and beautiful stabilized mud plastered walls. And you can see the wind catches as they are. And then another slide, this shows how the wind catches are sort of grouped together, plus the way the wind scoops, bring the air in, and that distributes into the interior of the building. And then on the right is this amazing Seti house in Peshawar, in the walled city of Peshawar, which I was able to conserve. The courtyard configuration creates its own microclimate within buildings without relying on any mechanical means. At night, cool air stored in the atrium keeps the surrounding room cool during much of the day. And that's how the whole thing works. And then, of course, there is this amazing Mughal period with the Shalimar Gardens and this expanse of water and with fountains and so on. And then on the right is part of the Lahore Fort, the World Heritage Site of Lahore Fort, where again, the cooling water cools the surrounding areas. And then it's from examples such as these from which I understand the value or understood the value of ancient wisdom and traditional techniques for providing buildings of great comfort without using energy. So now, if you say, now what are the challenges? In Pakistan, we really face a large number of challenges. So although custodians of extremely rich and diverse heritage, Pakistan faces enormous social and environmental challenges, as today over 50% live below the poverty line. And COVID, of course, has made it much worse. A majority, particularly women and children, continue to suffer from a multiple of deficits due to a lack of social and physical infrastructure, poor healthcare, low literacy levels, lack of access to safe, disaster-resilient housing, scarcity of potable water, inadequate sanitation arrangements, and clean cooking arrangements, along with extensive energy poverty. It is ironic that although I belong to a low-income economy and industrially less developed country, only after I had brought to a close my career as a star architect of 36 years, it was recurring disasters in Pakistan from 2005 that forced my attention towards the vast marginalized sections of my own country. As a practicing architect, barring a few projects, I had indulged in an extravagant, egotistic journey, which largely focused on serving the elite of my country. Here's this Pearso house building that I designed in the early 1980s for the largest oil company in Pakistan, listed in Fortune 500, with extravagant use of cement and steel, reflective glass, and aluminum. But once I became aware of the reality, it was no longer possible for me to ignore the change in mindset that was needed. There are estimated to be over 3 billion people around the world who require shelter and other basic facilities for survival alone. This vast population remains underserved or unserved today. Most of these, of course, belong to South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Thus, I believe that that democratization of architecture and utilizing participatory approaches using locally sourced materials have become paramount. To deal with the challenges of confronting us today, all nations, including the industrialized world, equally needs to be conscious of the cost that has to be paid to sustain the prevalent modes of living and building, which result in fast depletion of the planet's resources. Since Pakistan is located on major fault lines and in the path of melting glaciers, it suffers from recurring disasters, mostly earthquakes and floods. Being engaged in humanitarian work since 2005 countrywide devastating earthquake, I have felt compelled to seek inspiration from cultural heritage and vernacular traditions in order to work out low-cost, sustainable methodologies that resonate with the aspirations of marginalized sections in my country. For me, it had to be by disposing of my inflated ego. I've been able to regularly interact with poverty-stricken populations that has enabled me to explore their age-old practices. Through this process, I have understood that design cannot be a standalone activity. It must be underpinned by considerations of social impact and ecological sustainability. So there are two parts to my presentation today. One is BASA, of course, or Barefoot Social Architecture, and the other one is how traditional urbanism can equal eco-urbanism. So let's look at the first part of it now. This is a slide showing barefoot in Pakistan. Because of widespread deficits and deprivations, particularly among women, for me, the pursuit for justice has been paramount. And the reason why I have decided to design a stratagem called Barefoot Social Architecture, or BASA, for the disadvantaged, this is the reason that I did that. I felt empathy with those who walked barefoot and had become my fellow travelers. While the notion of being barefoot may be strange for many living in more affluent societies, for me, barefoot is a common sight in our rural areas. It demonstrates the harshness of life, but it has its own benefits also. You are able to tread softly on earth and grow up using the planet's resources with care. It reminds us that all of us have to learn to use the earth's resources judiciously. So what is BASA? Some of you have probably heard of it. BASA is akin to social engineering for bringing about social change, incorporating environmental, cultural, and technical dimensions, resulting in transformation of mindsets from a cycle of dependency to a culture of pride and self-reliance. On the one hand, BASA seeks to democratize architecture that provides people with well-being and self-esteem. On the other, it unashamedly promotes zero carbon footprint structures, using ubiquitous earth, conservative magic lime, and renewable bamboo. While working with marginalized communities, I have stumbled upon numerous design opportunities, unclaimed before, in the pursuit of fulfilling the exigencies of social and ecological well-being. Recently, when Cliff Pryor of an international impact fund declared at COP26 in Glasgow, and I quote, "Tangible sense of social justice is key to net zero transition," unquote. I felt vindicated in my view that I have advocated for several years past now to give priority to social justice values, adoption of which would provide incomparable ecological gains for all of us. On the one hand, the task seems daunting. On the other, it opens up untold prospects to build for environmental professionals, architects, engineers, and planners to create design alternatives for fulfilling the need of the planet, as well as emergent requirements of those living on the margins. So let's look at BASA impact. This is a study that we did for our work that we did between 2011 and 2018. And as you can see that the benefit that were accrued through this implementation of these principles, we were able to provide assistance to 0.84 million people in 7 years, or over 100,000 persons per year, through our zero carbon rights-based development, and it aims to achieve about 12 out of 17 sustainable development goals at an extremely low cost. And so let's look at BASA tenets now. Those who are familiar with my work know that BASA relies on 4 tenets. First is maximizing the potential of existing barefoot ecosystem, which is applying 3 zeros. I would really like zero cost to donor, zero carbon, and zero waste methodologies, leading eventually to zero poverty. Secondly, focus on social and ecological justice through humanistic architecture, fostering pride, dignity, and well-being, and preventing depletion of the planet's resources. Thirdly, delivery of unmet needs through barefoot entrepreneurs, or Bs that I call them, with particular focus on women. And through Barefoot Incubator for social good and environmental sustainability of business, for training in affordable products for BOP, which is bottom of the pyramid. And then fourthly, non-engineered structures for shrinking ecological footprint, using green skills and sustainable locally sourced materials. So working with marginalized communities in the last years has allowed me to adopt a bottoms-up approach, encouraging efficient use of funds and resources, rights-based development, knowledge sharing through training and guidance for cost-effective input. This in turn has stimulated the barefoot ecosystem in order to foster a life of reasonable fulfillment through an enabling process of serving and sharing with the other disadvantaged populace. So let's look at our tenet number 1, which is maximizing the barefoot ecosystem. So among the reasons for BASA outreach have been the maximization of this particular, what I call the barefoot ecosystem, which is vast in many countries. In some, it really consists of over 70 or maybe even 80%. So while working with marginalized communities, I have enabled, so with them, I'm sorry, just a moment, let's look at my other notes. There we are. So now let's look at the segments of BASA. First is barefoot economy. Secondly, barefoot market. Thirdly, barefoot enterprises. Fourthly, barefoot entrepreneurs. Fifthly, barefoot skills. And sixthly, barefoot products. So these are the different aspects of barefoot ecosystem, which can all be maximized, and you can get really fantastic results. And then you can see this in graphic form, how everything adds together for really helping barefoot ecosystem to flourish as much as possible. So I know that not many economists will believe in this because there are other ways of looking at it, but I found that working with these particular aspects, I'm able to reach out to a vast number of really marginalized people. So let's look at this now. For my work, I have really 2 gurus. And of course, the first one is Hassan Fatihi, the Earth Guru, author of Architecture for the Poor, who taught me the value of engaging them to unleash their creativity. He was really something quite extraordinary, a visionary who in the 1930s was talking about the poor when none of us ever even thought about it. And then look at this one. This is, of course, my lime guru, which is, as you all must know him well, actually, the Roman Marcus Vitruvius, from whom I learned the use of lime, as well as the importance of air, water, earth, and fire, 4 elements, the alchemy of which leads us to democratic norms and behavior. And my palette for zero carbon is only really earth, lime, and bamboo for my humanitarian architecture. And that is what I'm able to achieve with these materials, carbon neutral structures. So in this slide, you can see the attributes of each material. Now let's look at earth. This is a combination of unfired clay-rich earth and straw that provides passive environmental control, buffers relative humidity, creates non-toxic, healthy internal environment. Its waste becomes a resource, and it minimizes stress on heating or cooling systems. It is a miracle material with zero embodied energy and zero eco footprint. And then there's the low energy lime. Here you see it, which through the alchemy of fire transforms a lump of stone into an unparalleled force that has provided strength to Bronze Age Egyptian pyramids, the 1st century BC Roman aqueducts, and the impregnable 15th century Timurid forts. And once the common earth and lime are mixed together, water provides a strength that cannot be surpassed by any other material, but at the least by Portland cement. And then, of course, the third is bamboo, which is the environmentalists love, which is absolute, they love bamboo in the way that they use them. And this is the world's largest renewable resource, which due to its resilience and ease of use is the mainstay of my non-engineered seismic and flood resistant structures. Technically classified as grass, it yields a new crop every 2 to 3 years. So really you can just keep on using it. And in fact, you can grow it in your backyard and you can maybe make a house with it as well. Coincidentally, the use of such materials is the very route that needs to be taken if the depletion of the planet's resources are to be forestalled, and if global warming is to be minimized, the route to zero or low ecological footprint. Now, let's look at now the tenet number 2, which is focused on social and ecological justice through humanistic architecture. And I just wanted to show you a few examples of this as to how I'm learning from heritage and traditional building techniques. And this is really a conical roof in the desert of Sindh, which survived the floods. And this is my interpretation of how it can be used today. This is a school, double-story school that we built in one of the villages. And the attributes you can see are bamboo attached roof, lime stabilized mud walls, locally sourced materials, and economical construction and form based on age-old wisdom. And this is really highly ventilated roof where the air just passes through, keeps the whole thing quite cool. And then this is another one that I'm using quite a lot, which is this timber bracing, again in a building that survived the earthquake, this devastating 2005 earthquake. But our innovation is to use bamboo instead of wood. And you can see that it really creates a very strong and resilient structure. And this is the basis of the log, or it's called the Lari octogreen, that students here have been working on in several universities in Pakistan, and students and faculty members of Politecnico di Milano recently did a remarkable job in building scale models of the bamboo log in Milan. So this is something that's now going forward, and there are many young people who are actually now experimenting with this kind of material and this kind of forms. And then this is a women's center again in the rural area in Pakistan, where floods are happening every year. And this is a kind of animation that was done by Al Jazeera when they discussed my work on one of their documentaries. And the water just keeps on rises, and then anybody who's on the upper level is safe. And this is all bamboo structure. It is not very expensive. It can be done made by people themselves. So let's go on to the tenet number 3 now. They are going to be now examples of how to deliver unmet needs of the poor using locally sourced materials and by training through Barefoot Incubator for social good and environmental sustainability. The concept is drawn from incubators set up to promote technology, which have built-in mechanisms for hand-holding and assistance for marketing. So these are really the primary need items, which is zero carbon one room, a safe one room, which will not be affected by either earthquake or floods. And this is a toilet, and it's 30,000. So it's maybe about, I think maybe $700, $800, something like that. Or is it less? I'm sorry. It's well, I'm sorry, we'll have to calculate. I can't remember now what the exact, but it's very, very inexpensive. And then you can see this one is the Urban Pakistan Chulah that Cassim referred to, which is entirely an earth platform. And the stove, the cooking stove is absolutely clean. It provides very hygienic food. And the platform itself has elevated the status of women in their own society. So it's really just something that's very simple, but that really changes lives, and particularly of women, that of course I'm very concerned with, because we have to really help them to rise above whatever adversity they might be facing. And architecture can actually play a very important role in that. And then this is the one that got this award from World Habitat. We are very proud of it because it was given because we built something like, by that time, I think we put about maybe 40,000 of these stoves. And it was brought very kindly by the executive director to give it to us in Makli in 2019, a big conference within Pakistan. It was handed over to the president of Pakistan, who handed over to me, but I handed it over to Champa, who herself has earned enormous amount of money by just teaching about how to make these stoves. And she used to earn $30 perhaps a month, and now her income is more than $750 a month. So that's the kind of scaling up in the Barefoot ecosystem, and utilizing the Barefoot ecosystem for even the poorest of the poor to be able to make a lot of money. I'm hoping to make lots of millionaires out of these with many other things that we're now trying to do. So these are the way that we are training women and men from these very really marginalized communities. And there's a whole process of training that we carry out, and they are all really green skills and very low cost materials which fulfill the unmet needs of the other poor around them. This is another view of our training center, the Zero Carbon Cultural Center, SZC3, where there's a whole production of, for instance, terracotta tiles is going on. And these were really people who had been beggars just about a year ago. And so now we come to our tenet number 4, which is about non-engineered structures for shrinking the ecological footprint. And I just thought I'll share with you what's happening with the present construction. As you can see, these are UNEP figures: 40% of world energy, 16% of world's water usage, 3 billion tons of raw material, and 15 to 20% of waste stream. And then steel at 800 degrees C, Portland cement at 1550, ceramic brick even at 1,000. I mean, these are horrific figures, and they will never be able to contain the rise, temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, as had been with the Paris Agreement, and now recently with COP26. And if you look at this now figure, this is a brick structure that was built, a burnt brick structure, by one of the international agencies working in Pakistan after the floods of 2010. And one of the advisors, Magnus, actually calculated, and he came to the conclusion that this has resulted in deforestation of about over 50,000 acres, forests. So these are things that need to worry us, because we need to see what we are doing when we are using these materials. How are we hurting the planet by using the materials that we are so used to, and especially cement and steel. And then this I thought I'll show you, because these are one of the 40,000 shelters that were built with IOM. We were the technical advisors, and that's how we managed to spread it so much. And that happened because interestingly, I was running short of funds, because somehow donor fatigue had set in. And so now they were interested to look at cheaper options or economical options. And that's how I was able to use and promote my earth and lime on a very large scale. So you can see this is $190 compared to what we had, about $1,000. So you can see that the cost is significantly less. There are no carbon emissions, there are no trees were felled, 1,750 villages were covered, and 300 persons, 1,000 persons were housed. And again, materials are only locally sourced clay, low energy lime, and renewable bamboo. This is again another example of a similar kind of house that was built by people themselves, with the roof that is with these bamboo joists and earth masonry and lime and earth plaster. And then this is the way they decorate when they build themselves. They're so proud of it. It's women who are really in the forefront. They are the ones who really are taking everything forward so much with so much enthusiasm. It's quite remarkable. And then I wanted to show you this because this is the latest one, which is not quite latest, but this is something that we are using quite a lot because this is actually made out of bamboo prefabricated panels. And you will see that this is just a simple octagon. The panels make an 8-sided room, basically, which is used by the poorest of the poor. And we also have used them for our very eminent guests who come in to visit Makli from abroad and from Pakistan. And it's very quickly done because prefab panels can be made anywhere, and then you just put them on. And now, for instance, you add on 2 more panels and you get a room, which is a classroom, like something like 18 feet by 12 feet. And now this is what we call a village center where we start using a domical roof. And this is about 18 foot by 18 foot. And so it's got multiple uses, and it can be just, different modules can be put together, and you get different sizes of rooms. And then this is our Intiba Center at Makli, and this was actually very kindly, it was supported by His Royal Highness Prince of Wales, because, and it's all nothing but bamboo and thatch and lime and earth. And this is something that's working well. And then again, this is the Zero Carbon Cultural Center. This is again built with the prefabricated bamboo panels, vertical ones, and then even the trusses are kind of prefabricated and put in place. And you can see that it's really a big marquee like structure, which provides a huge amount of space for all kinds of cultural activities and trainings and international conferences. It's about 17-foot high prefab panels, and the width is about 57 feet. It's 83 feet long, and so on. This is the most ambitious structure that we have actually built so far. And then I just thought I'll just show you the interior a little bit. There are little pavilions where we keep on doing all kinds of craftspersons sit there and work there. And also this is the international conference that was held in 2019. And these are all our eminent guests from abroad and from Pakistan. And there, as you can see, it's big enough that it served very well for that purpose. And I just wanted to show you this, that, there are these eminent guests who had come, and they are now sitting with these poor artisans who are teaching them how to, with the green skills and the materials, these very, very simple rudimentary materials. And that was a lot of fun. This is something that we've just designed for an urban setting, for informal settlements in places like Karachi. And you can see that you start out with one room, but it's the same prefab panel that's being used here as well. So you start with a room and just basically a toilet, and then later on you add a veranda and the kitchen there, and you add a staircase, and the third stage you can also add another room. So it's incremental, it's very affordable. People can be taught to do it all themselves. And then this is something that I think Cassim mentioned. This is how I'm teaching people how they can do everything themselves. These are video tutorials. They're all on the YouTube, open source. Anybody can look at them and build their own house. Because see, the problem in countries like mine is that there is no way that the poor can actually have access to any kind of shelter of any kind, because everything is far too expensive. But if they can be taught, or if they can learn how to make it themselves, then it is so much cheaper, absolutely affordable, and they can just do it themselves. So I think that, this is the way I think I need to reach. Maybe, there's something like maybe definitely more than 1 million households that require this kind of housing. So there we are. And then I just thought I'll just show you very quickly how we are training now people who come, artisans and others. They are from poor people from a rural area in Pakistan, and they've come here to the Zero Carbon Center to learn about really doing it themselves. So they can watch the video, but they're also getting training as to how they exactly to take every step. And you can see there are many women here as well. And this is the amazing thing now, that women who they're non-literate, they've never been even out of their houses, but they are willing to come and they're willing to learn. And that's where I think, that's really the hope is, because if people like that can come and learn, they can go back, and they are going back and doing their own things. So I'll try to see if I can fast forward a little bit, if I can, and you can see a little bit more of it. So they're learning how to drill, how to, make the connection, how to put it all together. These are all these prefab panels that they're able to then work with, and they can even erect it all up. So there's a lot of hope in how we can proceed with these things. And this is the roof that is being put together and joined together, and then it folds like an umbrella, so it can be transported anywhere, wherever you want. You can take it all with you. And then this I wanted to show you that in Islamabad, these are very eminent architects. There's Murad Jamil in the center and Fawzia Asad Khan, who conducted the whole thing. About 75 architects and students learned how to do this. And this is the same log, the same system, but a kind of an urban setting. And this I wanted to just show you to explain how it's spreading now. This is the model that was done by students in Politecnico di Milano, a scaled down model, but they've done amazing work in terms of, sort of making graphic designs and working with bamboo. And the center one is in a village. After they were trained, they went back and they're starting to build. And this one on the right is really a French architect who's getting it done in an orphanage in Malawi in Africa. So that's where we are with all that. Now I come to the second part of my presentation. I hope I'm not going to go for too long, but I just wanted to show you what is possible in terms of, how can we equate traditional urbanism with eco-urbanism. So in this changed world, I fear that cities such as your own New York and many emulating Middle Eastern and Asian capitals, which once proudly expressed ecological disdain through their magnificent architectural edifices, may not be relevant anymore. In my view, the high carbon, high density, glittering skyscrapers will no longer appear as the urbanist future beacon. Instead, as we get accustomed to carrying out business remotely, I believe eco-urbanism will take root, drawing upon ancient wisdom and traditional environments, surviving in many countries. And so let's see, traditional urbanism. In Pakistan, we have amazing medieval walled cities from which I continue to draw inspiration for devising affordable, sustainable, eco-driven, and carbon-neutral alternatives. In our historic towns, we know that today, in our historic town, they are winding narrow streets, as well as stacking of 3 to 4 story houses with their multi-level terraces. And this one is the walled city of Lahore, and an artist's view here, as you see on the left, showing in it multi-story structures, and then on the right is the model, a 19th century model in the Lahore Museum in the city of Lahore. And you can see the organic morphology in this of the town, which is vehicular-free walking streets, low-rise, medium-density development, mixed 24-hour cycle, zero or low energy usage, natural cooling, passive solar designs, courtyards or atriums, and subterranean chambers, and semi-public spaces for community interaction. In my view, these lessons lead to eco-urbanism. And that would put a limit to the urban sprawl. I hope we can do that. Introduce low-rise, medium-density formations with open to sky terraces for families to remain in contact with nature when a pandemic strikes, with pedestrian enclaves and local round-the-corner shopping, without being disrupted by vehicular traffic, which should rightly be now relegated to the periphery. So the need for more extensive vehicular mobility is curtailed and the consumption levels are reduced in the new world order. What if eco-cities could embody the virtues of carbon-neutral environments, nature conservation, and biodiversity enhancement, and conversion of many existing vehicular roadways into landscaped, forested walking streets and cultural squares for lowering pollution levels, interventions that lead to better health and well-being of humankind? Because I have no doubt in my mind that human and planetary health will take center stage in all future developments. We know that today urban centers are the front line of climate change battlegrounds and require urgent measures for creation of healthy, sustainable environments. So it is good to see billionaire Bill Gates explaining how climate change disasters could be avoided. And he writes, and I quote, "Rich countries are best suited to develop innovative climate solutions," unquote, expecting the vast talent and inexhaustible resources available in the West to find universal solutions, which to me appears somewhat dismissive of disaster resilient traditional techniques based on local wisdom that I'm promoting. He's perhaps driven by what I call the Western charity model that he has utilized extensively in Asia and Africa, pitting the so-called beneficiaries as victims and deserving of handouts, a stance that unfortunately promotes dependency rather than fostering their empowerment and self-reliance, which you know are core values of Baza. I believe it's a good idea for the Global South to seek its own affordable and sustainable solutions, which are drawn from traditional knowledge and resonate with cultural aspirations of its own people and communities. For myself, equating traditional urbanism to eco-urbanism, I'm applying many ecocentric strategies in the walking street implemented for the regeneration of Karachi's historic core, which I'd like to just present to you very, very quickly. So here's the Dancehall Rouser walking street, and it is for the regeneration of the historic core. It's climate smart, heritage and people centered. As the Miyawaki dense forest, it has cultural and creative activity street, higher revenues, improved commerce, increased local and foreign tourism. This is all happening in it now. And just to show you very quickly, this is Karachi, the vast city. And then this is where we are talking of a very little space here, which is the historic core of the city. And this is a map of 1890, I think it is, and it's in my book that I co-authored with my son on Karachi, and this shows how there were different quarters during the time of the British, just as they came in. And then this is how it looked like. I said just when we took on the project, it was really in the worst possible kind of urban blight, and it was just an impossible state when you looked at it as to how it could ever be improved. So so the concept was developed to deal with urban blight and creation of healthier environment in the midst of highly degraded, dilapidated area. So today it has become known as zero carbon street with zero steel, zero concrete, and zero emissions. So just to very quickly show you, this was the concept that was developed with the forest in between and the whole sort of middle kind of spine in the middle, which was which had all the other activities while the paving was on the sides. And again, very quickly, on the left is how we took it on, what it looked like. On the right is what it is now looking when we just completed it. And another view on the left is the beautiful Denso Hall on the right, but you can see it was hardly visible. And now that it's been cleaned up, on the right is the view of it today. Again, very quickly, conserving all historic buildings. There are 12 of them. So they've been collaboration with owners, removal of illegal constructions, and so on and so on. So it now we are transforming the area by also conserving as many of the buildings as possible. There are 12 of them there. And then there in the paving, we have got iconic sort of icons of different historic buildings so that people begin to understand what they are or learn about them. And the climate smart design, greenhouse gas reductions, urban flooding and heat island control has happened. There was no flooding this year when the rains came. This is the kind of paving that has been 3,000 square feet of permeable pavements. These have been made by our beggar communities, which you saw in Makli, who are toiling away, making these, learning about this craft. This is the ancient craft of terracotta. And then there's the environmental impact, there's biodiversity, there's water conservation. The air is really, really clean now. And you can see there are forests and everything that was visual clutter has all gone from here. It was a difficult task, we managed to accomplish that. And then it's becoming an activity area where all kinds of cultural activities are now happening. And this is just a view to show exactly what was happening here, or there's structures, forests, pedestrian walkways, food courts, pushcart court, aquifer wells, and open air cafes, etc. So this is basically the concept of it. And just that I would like to now just try to see if I can stop my slide so I can just do the conclusion. Thank you. And then imagine what could be if we all decided to fashion a divergent but more egalitarian, just and humane world, and transform the present carbon-intensive environments through an inspired architectural vocabulary which would tread lightly on the planet. Imagine if we all begin to create architecture not just for the select few. The question is, will most architects continue to design iconic and ostentatious megastructures, or will they veer towards the democratization of architecture based on community participation, co-building and co-creation, a kind of new way of conceptualizing? Will they help to minimize the use of high energy consumptive cement and steel by creating hybrid structures, a combination of high carbon skeletons and low carbon infill and finishes, incorporating my favorite zero carbon materials, lime instead of cement, bamboo rather than wood, and lime stabilized earth and aggregate that will make cement concrete redundant. This phase in our lives may be unsettling, as there is a great deal of comfort in opting for well-trodden avenues. But I can tell you from my own experience, nothing could be more enriching than the exploration of an unpaved vagabond pathway. Although these are challenging times, they also present exceptional opportunities for mending the existing imbalances and stitching the frayed tapestry of our planet. Let us devise ways to design humanistic, inclusive architecture that is responsive to the needs of vulnerable masses who have not been considered worthy of attention by designers, but who can no longer be ignored in a global village where COVID-19 has blurred distinctions and has equalized humanity. Imagine if those in global north also adopted Basel principles and to assist those living on the margins and suffering from untold deprivations, the homeless, the migrants and minorities, and the underprivileged. If we devoted some of our time to work out strategies for guidance for co-building and co-creation that would give control to people to build and live in well-designed, safe, and affordable housing, it could become a movement towards democratic, humanistic architecture that would take care of both people and the planet. I thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was truly, truly inspiring. And we, unfortunately, not being live, you don't get the benefit of the standing ovation that I'm sure would have resounded. But I'm seeing come in on the chat as well as in the Q&As and other sort of social media chatter, just how inspiring your work is. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. And I would love to, I'm gonna have I have so many questions for you, but I'm gonna limit myself to just a few and then open it up to the audience. So please, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A, not the chat, and we'll try and get to as many of them as we can. So I'm particularly interested in the evolution of your work in terms of how the preservation and the conservation work has informed the humanitarian work. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the early days of the Heritage Foundation and how the research and documentation of vernacular architectural traditions in Pakistan, which aren't just limited to the indigenous traditions, but also the Mughal traditions. You showed us the ways in which the walled city of Lahore is a model of a kind of urban density that is generative of a certain kind of life, security, and vitality, as well as British colonial traditions in Karachi and elsewhere. So how did the documentation and the research influence the work you do today in terms of these Baza principles? How has the historic preservation work influenced the ways you've designed programs for sustainable shelter? And yeah, tell us a little bit more about that that interface between the conservation, preservation, and the humanitarian design.
Right. Well, it goes a long way back. I mean, we're talking of really 1980s and so on. And at that time, of course, I had my practice, and I just felt that we need to understand more about my own country, because as a child, I'd lived in a very protective environment. My father was a British trained civil servant, and so very, very kind of aloof areas like the civil lines. Never had visited any of the towns, even though he served in Lahore, he served in Multan, but never were never allowed to step out of that. So after we came back, and my husband is an Oxonian, he was there at Oxford and I was at Oxford Brookes. And when we came back, I felt that I had to learn more about it. So that's how we started to roam the different streets. And that kind of stayed with me because it struck me that I was looking at everything with completely new eyes. I'd never seen anything like it. And I've been taught something quite different when I was studying architecture. And so, yeah, it was fascinating for me as I came back. But, the way the architectural practices, you really get into this whole rat race where you just carry on and you don't stop, because you just, carry on having more commissions. And that's why in 2000, I decided, I had to just give up. I had to stop. And although I had done some work, like, I'd done this social housing, Anguri Bagh, we talked about it the other day, that was really drawn from my walking in the streets of Lahore, the walled city. And so, of course, I was carrying all that with me, but never had really a chance to really use all that until the earthquake struck. And then, of course, everything that I'd learned, I could apply. That was the most amazing thing that happened, actually, just completely changed my life. And I thought I'd given up. I thought I would not be designing anything anymore in my life. And then all this happened. And so it's been wonderful because both have supported each other. What I've learned in heritage work, I've applied in my humanitarian work, whether it's the bamboo dome or whether, as I showed you some of the examples, it's all there. It's all been drawn from, our traditions. And then similarly, I've applied the work I've done in humanitarian field and in my conservation work, because I believe that we should do low-cost conservation also. I think there's such a huge reservoir of heritage, and if we don't really take care of it, it'll all be gone. So we need to find solutions that are affordable, that are economical, in which we can involve communities to come and work on. You should not be just dependent on great experts to come and do the work. I mean, it's a different way of doing things. Unless we do that, we won't have anything left. Right. So, these are all the thoughts that I have, and some of them I am able to implement, but not all of them. So there we
But
are.
what's so inspiring, I think, is the way in which it's also just such a commitment to constant learning, that we're seeing in your work, the way in which you're learning from the people you're working with, the way in which you're committed not only to the structures themselves, but to people learning how to make them themselves in self-sufficient ways, and really learning. And it's not just the design principles, but also the engineering, right? I love seeing the ways in which the cooling towers, not just in the monumental things like Shalimar Gardens, but also the ways in which indigenous traditions were able to deal with extreme heat and extreme cold in ways that our modern systems are less efficient and much more brittle. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit, based on all you've learned in this incredible journey, especially in the last 15 years, speak a little bit more, you said a couple times, and I think this is a very provocative and important idea, about what lessons your work might have to offer other places in the world. And I don't only mean, poor countries like Pakistan or Malawi. The crisis of attainable shelter is obviously global. You spoke about how solutions to the ecological crisis can be found in the global South. How do the ideas you are working with, the Baza principles, translate to other contexts, especially in the Europes and the North Americas of the world?
Yeah. Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, of course, because I've never worked anywhere in my life except my own country. So I'm nobody to really, I think, give advice on that. But I do think that there are certain principles that can be applied in countries like yours as well, in the West, and highly industrialized and sophisticated society, so to speak. Because the way I see it now, I see homelessness everywhere. I see disparities everywhere, wherever I go, whether it's Europe or whether it's America, wherever. And I think architects have got to respond to that now, because there is a huge number of people who need our help. And, a lot of times there are young architects who are talking to me quite a lot now, and from all over the world, actually. And what they're saying is, yes, we understand. Yes, we are interested. Yes, we want to do it. But how do we do it? Because the way the practice is, it requires that you work in an office, that you are commissioned, only then you can do anything. But I feel that the time has come for us to forget about commissions, to go into communities and say, what is the need there? Try to understand them. And they say, and offer your services and say, okay, we will try and give you a design option to say how you can do these things. And then they will be willing to pay. I think the poor or the people who don't have that much money are willing to pay as long as they get good advice. But we've not tried it out. And I think in your country, as well as any other that are, privileged or better off, but I think there are still pockets everywhere of people who don't have anything. Absolutely. Why is it that architects don't think that they have something to offer them? And so I think all of us must sit down together, think about this, and see how we can serve them. Because this is finally, architecture is vocation, and that's how I was taught when I was studying in England, particularly. that it's not something that you just make money from.
Right.
You have to serve humanity, you have to serve people. And I think we have to go back to that somehow, because we can actually help a lot of people. I mean, design is such a powerful tool that architects and others like them have, that, you could do it. So I don't know, but I mean, I would very much like to sit together with anybody who's interested to discuss this and see how is it that we can do it. But I know a lot of young people are in a dilemma. They don't know exactly how to go about it.
Yeah.
So we should be able to work together on that,
Absolutely. No, and I think a lot of it has to do not just with sort of the traditions of design education, but also the power imbalance culturally between people with expertise and people with real needs on the ground. And so one question that's coming in from an audience member from Fatime Shirpur writes, how could you convince people that as strangers from a different social class, you understand their problems, you see their capabilities, and you can have better solutions for their problems, especially when you first started? How did you gain their trust?
You're so right. It's such a good question, because, I'm as much of an alien in these places as maybe you would be. I mean, anybody going from another country. And initially, it was difficult. And people said, I must have some kind of ulterior motive to be there. Otherwise, why should I, And I have to tell you that being a woman has tremendous advantage, because I could go and start working with women, and then they don't see you like that. They just see you as a person who's got sympathy with them. And in Pakistan, these classes, the so-called lower classes, are so hospitable and generous. I mean, you go there and they'll just take out. I mean, those people who were affected by the earthquake, they would take out the best, whatever rickety table they had left or whatever cloth they had, and give you World Food Program biscuits and tea and eggs. That's all they had for themselves, and they would offer it to you because they thought you'd come to help. So I think you have to gain confidence only gradually. But I would suggest that, I think women will have an easier time, because I think we can talk to women much more easily and they understand you much better. And then I've learned how to eat everything. I drink water everywhere, because, you just have to do it. And somehow you gain confidence then that, you're not sort of trying to say, no, I can't have this or that. Mm-hmm. And there's small things that you have to learn to do, but also you have to really give up your ego entirely. You cannot work with an inflated ego in these areas. Mm-hmm. You have to be really humble, and you really have to go and try to learn, because there's so much learning that is there. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult, but I think everybody can do it. You just have to give it a try.
Yeah. Here's another question coming from Paul Lewis. Hi, Paul. It's wonderful to see how you are changing the purpose and agency of the architect. To that end, how have you had to change your use of drawings and other forms of documentation, particularly if the intent is to disseminate architectural knowledge about this approach to building to those without architectural training?
Yes, very interesting, huh? It's really an interesting question, because we have, as architects, we are so kind of, how shall I say now, in a sense, because of our egos and everything, we think that only we know how to learn things or do things, or whatever, drawings even, and so on. And then you go to these people and you talk to them, and if it's graphics, the ones I work with are mostly non-literate. Something like 90% do not know how to even read. And for us, even if they teach them how to do their signature, that is such a big achievement, but they're very smart. The poor people are really, really smart, and we don't give them enough credence. So if you do more graphics as much as possible, and now, with technology, my God, the whole world is open now. Yeah. Because, you have videos, you have all kinds of things. So you can, step by step, you can really tell people what to do. And people are able to follow, this is the amazing thing. But we have to really make it as simple as possible. And you saw my women are reading drawings. They've never stepped out of their houses, you won't believe, But you put your faith in people. In what they call the lower classes in my country, they are not considered even to be be at par with anybody, but they are the ones who are very, very smart, and they will be so they do everything so well. So it's a matter of just spending time with them and understanding them, and they should know that you really you have sympathy and empathy with them. That's important, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another another aspect that you touched on that also is in reference to Paul's question about representation is the importance of the YouTube video tutorials. I mean, I would love it if you could speak a little bit more about training and how you came to realize, because that's also something that even architects who are very socially engaged often feel a certain level of proprietariness about their method or their system or their program, even if it is one that is meant to be generative of new kinds of solutions for impoverished communities. But the way in which you are empowering through education, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about skill building and how training fits into the vision of how to really sort of make Baza principles extend outwards. I mean, you mentioned Champa, who has made an income from training others to build the Chulah stove. Could you talk a little bit about training as a form of empowerment and the role of the tutorials and other ways of skill building in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, of course, we've been doing the usual thing of, making the drawings and, teaching some of them who will then go and build. And then I realized, more recently, actually, I mean, the whole system I felt was not working because whatever we did was not reaching out to them, to a large number or as large as I would like. Mm-hmm. It was reaching out to some, but it was limited. I mean, when we say 40 or 50,000 houses, it's a drop in the ocean, I might tell you, because the issue is really far larger. And so for the longest time, I did not know, but COVID-19 gave a lot of time for us all to reflect a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with me, that, I was sitting and, we were not able to work in the field. And everything had kind of come to a standstill, basically, in all the work we were doing with marginalized communities. And I decided, I have to reach out to them. How do I do it now? And so we all sat around, and I've got a very small crew. Heritage Foundation is a very, very, we're a very limited number who work together. And so we discussed, and through Zoom and other things, we started to work and to make out the whole thing. And especially, we had a lot of material in terms of videos of what we'd done earlier. So we tried to put it all together. And I wasn't sure how to do it and the language and this, that, but, and I'm afraid it's all done. It's all kind of, we don't have any fancy kind of equipment or anything. We just do it with usual kind of whatever is available. And we found that, whatever we did was making sense. And so I think we've done about more than 24 now, but there are more to go, because for every for everything that they do, they need help, because they don't have access to, computers and Google and all the rest of it. They need all kinds of help, whatever it is, whether it's income generation, whether it's keeping the place clean, whether it's growing, there's all kinds of things that you can grow on water that they can use, that you can have, hydroponics and aquaponics. All this has to be taught, and they will learn. So it's an unending list. I mean, I feel that, we just started, we've got to do much more to really make a difference in their lives. So, but everybody can do it, because now you have technology. I mean, all you are young people. I mean, at my age, if I can do it, gosh, you all can do it definitely,
Absolutely. That is definitely a part of the inspiration, for sure. Here's a simple question from Ted Landrum. A simple, but I think a very important question, because it gets at questions of density and urbanization as well. How tall, how many stories can an earth lime wall climb in your experience?
I think we've definitely done 2 stories, no problem at all. And I suspect that if I was to, I hadn't had occasion or chance to really need anything like that. But you saw that Makli structure, the big one. I mean, that's 27 feet tall. So if we were to do it, we could go up to 3 stories. I mean, that's fine. I think if I was to use earth walls, maybe on the ground, and then maybe a bamboo structure above that, then, listen, when there are architects working, then you can just do so much, because then you'll get ideas as you work with these materials as to what the potential is. And that's what I need. We need more architects working with this kind of material. And then you will get really something fantastic. Because even today, there are some really amazing structures being built with bamboo, but it's only for the elite, not for the poor. The problem is, what do you do for the poor, for people who can't do it themselves?
Mhm.
So that's my focus. And I feel now architects' focus should be those. How do we get to them? How do we serve them, you know? And then we'll have to see how far we can go.
Yeah. Well, no, the height question and the density question also gets to something that's I come upon a lot in my own research, looking into self-help housing and incremental techniques. So I was really delighted to see the project at the end in Karachi with the bamboo panels, but then you were envisioning the possibility for a family to expand and grow, multi-generational families, and then, you know, add another story. And I know, I mean, we mentioned just in passing Anguri Bagh, the social housing project, but there was also the Lines settlement, right? Which was in 1980, which was also incremental and meant to be adapted and customized over time by the residents. So I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on that, especially because so much of this came from, you know, temporary emergency shelter in the initial inspiration. But then, as of course, those of us who know Pakistan know, temporary displacement places become permanent very, very, very quickly.
Absolutely.
So yeah, how do you think about time and, you know, generational change in the sort of constant adaptation of some of these structures?
Well, of course, the density question is very important, especially for the urban areas, because that's where the crunch is. But I do know that studies have now been done where now it's been proven that it's not only the skyscrapers that will give you the density, because you have to then leave the spaces around them as well. And then if you can do away with, for instance, vehicles, the vehicular movement is curtailed, then obviously you have much more space available for people living. So unfortunately, everywhere we've given too much importance to cars and to such like. So that's the one thing that I think we need to be looking at very, very carefully. Mm-hmm. Secondly, of course, I think for the poor, and they are really, the way they live, they are very high densities where they live. The informal settlements are not low density settlements. People are very, you know, they're clustered very close together. And a lot of times there's not even enough space for them to either move or breathe or anything. So we need to go there and fix all that up. I think but there are lots of leftover spaces everywhere. So for us to think the spaces are not there, no, that's not true, because they don't know how to maximize the space that they do have. That's why you need designers to go into these areas and you know, you can really provide the kind of service that's needed by them, which is then how can they make it livable for themselves. And you'll find that you can get very high density, even with a double-story structure. I think that's fine, because I think more than that, for women and children, it becomes very difficult, you know, to go up the stairs and so on. But you can have smaller units. They're willing to live in smaller units as long as you have some open spaces. Right. Because in Pakistan and such countries, there's more happens outside than it does inside, you know, the room. So I think we can build upon that, and I think we can do a very reasonable job of providing livable spaces.
Yeah.
You know?
No, and I think it's so important, because I think another critique among the many of the Western charity model and also the international development organizations model is a real limitation in seeing these kinds of environments exclusively as residential, right? Of course, they are homes, but they're also sites of livelihoods, of education, of, you know, craft, etc. So I wonder if you could share the anecdote about the concern that in Anguri Bagh about the chickens and where they might go. I love that story.
Okay, I don't know. Well, of course, it's very interesting. It was my first time that I was dealing with communities of that kind. I'd never dealt with any kind of, you know, marginalized sections in my life. I'd not known about them. So it was very new for me. But Anguri Bagh, the whole space was quite amazing, actually. And so these were people living in a nala, which is like a ditch or a stream of some kind. And I'd done some housing before, which I had opened to sky terraces. But as you know, open to sky terrace is actually a very low cost, because it provides you the more living space without really, you know, building it all up. So I thought, but then I had to do it in a very kind of inexpensive manner. I'd done my Navy housing, which had terraces, but that was expensive. And here it was totally the other end. And anyhow, so yeah, the women were not at all keen to move from wherever they are, however bad or poor their conditions were. So, and this is what they asked me. They said, well, if we move into these, they thought it was fancy kind of living spaces, where would our chickens go? And of course, maybe to others, it might not be anything serious, but of course, I understood that that's the source of their food for their children, eggs and other things. And you have to have these open spaces. I mean, I think doing Angudi Bagh taught me a lot about people, which I had not known before, as to what their needs are. And I think that's helped me later on, when I worked in the earthquake area. So it's all finally, all these, somehow I was lucky to get a lot of different kinds of experiences, even as an architect. I mean, most architects are quite sort of, aloof and protected in their own kind of world. And so that helped me a lot. Yes, it's been very useful to have gone through that and understanding how communities actually live, right. And especially the needs of women, I mean, that's very important.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
No, I mean, again, I think that just reinforces the extent to which not just your commitment to these humanitarian and ecological principles, but your commitment to constantly learning from the people you're working with, as well as educating, I think is the fact that it's that two-way exchange, I think really comes through very powerfully and is really, really inspiring. Speaking of working closely with women, Marcia Feuerstein writes, you've worked very closely with women, and I'm thinking of the early Heritage Foundation neighborhood festivals in Karachi and Lahore and elsewhere that reveal the beauty of their own places and culture, tangible and intangible, with the importance of caring for, teaching, and passing on traditional crafts and building practices. So I guess this is sort of in addition, perhaps, to the digital dissemination through YouTube tutorials. Do you see the need for continuing these kinds of grassroots events where people are coming together and reveling in the beauty of both material and immaterial heritage in Pakistan?
Yes, who is this person who asked this question? I'm very intrigued.
Marcia Feuerstein.
Oh, okay. All right. So, well, it's so good to hear this question, actually, I have to say. It was a long time ago, it was about 20 years ago, right? And yes, it was street festivals to celebrate heritage. And, the street that I made that I just showed you, this Densohal Rahguzar, it's really designed to have those caravan festivals. And we're gradually adding on a lot of those activities onto this. So there's been now discussion, there's a betak there, a place where there's a stage and people come and we are having lots of discussions there. And gradually, I think somebody has, some very famous artist that says she'll come, and Aisha Khalid has said that she'll come and have children coming and painting there, and so on and so on. So I'm hoping that it'll become, like every Sunday, we celebrate Karachi's diversity. There's so many different ethnic groups here. So each one can come and, show their cuisine, have their, clothes in that way, and I mean, all kinds of things like their customs and so on. And I think that's one way to see how we understand each other, because right now Karachi is, everybody's kind of isolated and separated, and, we need places and urban spaces like this where everybody can come together. So, so yeah, this would be, I'm hoping this is, again, we are working towards it, and hopefully within a few months, it will become very lively with all kinds of activities.
Oh, excellent. Well, I hope to be able to attend.
Yeah, I hope all of you come. Yes.
Here's another factual question. Where do you get the lime? Is it made locally from crushed lime that is quarried nearby, or are there other sources like crushed shells, etc.?
Is it for I know where you can get them in Pakistan. In Pakistan, it's available everywhere, because we don't have these huge factories that are producing lime. We have these little kilns all over the place. Where they're burning it, and you can get it everywhere. I've had no difficulty in procuring lime anywhere. You get the lump, basically, you get them, and then we worked out actually a very neat system of slaking now, because slaking normally is very difficult for conservation. That's what I'd learned with when you have you have to use water for that, and that's very difficult to transport. And then somehow I discovered this particular one where you just at night you take those lumps and you pour water on it, and this is shown in our videos. And then the next day you have this powdered form, which is as effective as any other. I can't use it for conservation, will never advise anybody to use it for conservation, but for humanitarian work, it's first class, it's absolutely perfect. So it's everywhere and can be very easily done. And you can carry it in bags now. You don't have to have containers. I mean, it's no longer any fluid. So yeah, so we have to find ways by which people can easily use it, because lime is very critical, without it, you can't actually use earth. I sensed
a collective digital gasp when you talked about brick and showed the carbon implications of brick, because I think a lot of people
Please give up brick.
associate.
Please don't. Everybody who is
Yeah.
using brick, please give it up. You don't need it. Just put lime into your earth and put it in the sun, and you'll have it. No
So-
need to have burnt brick
But
at
here's a
all.
question about that comes from the preservation angle, right? I mean, it was amazing also to see in terms of lime, thinking about Vitruvius, just seeing Hassan Fatih and Vitruvius in the same set of influences was amazing. But have you come across a disdain for building with earth rather than brick or block or stone because of the popular association of permanence?
Of
Of
course. I mean, it's very much there in everybody's mind. And initially, that was one of the biggest, really hurdles for me, because international organizations were just not willing to look at it.
Mhm.
And always it was, earth. And they told me, they told me nobody in the villages will accept it because they all want pakka units, which is, either concrete block or burnt brick. But the day, when we built the first one, and we said to 15 people to climb on the roof, that was it, because then everybody accepted it like anything. So every time we finished the house, we said, just climb up and see and check it out.
Right.
And that was it. So now I never face any kind of disdain for brick, because, we tell them, well, just use lime and do it and you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the cost, the low cost aspect of that.
And you see, what's important is for us to teach everybody how to build better, because the disasters are terrible. I mean, the displacement is awful. Whenever a disaster happens, whether it's earthquake or whether it's flood, there's total displacement of families. And, it's just a loss for I don't know how many months. So we have to teach everybody how to build better, so that everybody has a room, at least one room, that is safe in every possible way. So this is what my aim is. If I can get to everybody in Pakistan and all, then that's it. Just one room, one safe room. That's all I need. Just 1 million of them, maybe.
So what's next? Are there new programs or new ways you want to either disseminate this work or new? I mean, it was really also lovely to see not just the ways, and for me to be thinking about the ways in which the place where I live, New York City, can learn from context in Pakistan, but also how your rural work is now informing some of the urban work in Karachi and Lahore and other places. What are there new types of challenges you want to take on? Are there new ways you want to get the word out? What's next?
Yeah, I think I just want to reach everybody in Pakistan somehow. That's my priority. That somehow, if I could use technology so that every village that is there, they become, familiar with how they can build better. That's all I want to do, actually. Now, if it can be taken up elsewhere, but this is all you young people have to take it there. I don't have to do that work. So you should be now working out in your own places, wherever you are, because it's the young people who will do it. I must tell you this, because they can take on these challenges. So please do this. I'm there. I'm happy to discuss. I'm happy to, give whatever my knowledge is and my understanding is. I'm happy to discuss it. Mm-hmm. But finally, I think every architect who's really sensitive to all this, what is happening today, he or she are the ones who got to take it forward. Yeah. And because you will know your conditions better, you know how to handle it. But I'm there. I'm able to answer any questions, whatever. I'm happy to do that. That's my life now.
I can tell you from the chat on just this Zoom with almost 200 people at one point. You've lots of volunteers, people who are very excited to take up this mantle and take your inspiration to their local context. Yeah. So
let's work together. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yes, yeah. I can give you ideas and we can work together on this. That'll be wonderful. Be great. Maybe Architecture League should create a platform where we start doing it together in some way.
Rosalie, I think that's a great pivot to you.
That is a great idea.
There. Maybe she can do it, huh?
Yeah, that is a great idea. There's clearly so much interest in your work, admiration for your work, and desire to do the kind of work I think that you are doing. So thank you so much for a totally inspiring talk. Thank you to everybody. And this has been a great, very, very active Q&A board and chat board. We will put the video of this lecture up as soon as we can. It takes us a little bit of time, but we will turn it around as fast as we can. So, and I think we can do some, well, we certainly on our newsletter will let everyone know who reads the newsletter when the video of the talk is up. But Mrs. Lari, thank you so much. This was really inspiring for all of us. I know it's late in Karachi, so thank you for staying up late for us. And thank you, Cassim. This was really a terrific.
Cassim was a very good moderator, I have to say.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure and an honor. And I know I speak for all of us in saying we look forward to staying in touch, keeping up to date with what you're doing, and trying to implement some of these principles wherever it is we live. So thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye then. Bye.